So I think one thing I also wanted to touch on was, with all the experience you have working inside motorsport, do you still feel like a fan, or has it really changed the way that you watch and engage with the sport, that you still have that passion for, that we all still have that passion for? How has your perspective as a fan evolved?
I'm still a massive fan. I watch all different kinds of motorsport. My son is in particular. I don't know where he gets it from, but my son is as well. So we go to quite a lot of race meetings. The only thing I don't like, to be honest, I like to be on the inside if I'm going to a race meeting. I don't really like to just be in the grandstand watching. I kind of want to be involved somehow. So I quite like being in the pit lane, and I'll take a few pictures even if I'm not that involved with the team, just because that's the bit that I like, really. You know, I don't mind going and watching at one of the best corners or something for a while, but the thrill for me is still being involved with the team. So even though I go to a lot of race meetings, I always try to get somehow on the inside, because that's the slightly more exciting part. And I know it's difficult for the general public sometimes to do that, but with smaller race meetings, it's really not. You know, and things like the European Le Mans Series is a great example of that for me. I don't think they charge now for going in the paddock. So the general public can wander. If they do, it was like €10 or something last time I was there. So the general public can wander up and down the paddock, looking at some of the cars on display. They can even go in the back of your pit garage, and they might ask you if they can come take a picture of the car and that kind of thing. And I'm always up for that with the teams I'm with, and you know, taking that many pictures of people with the cars and so on. They ask you about the cars and the costs involved and all the rest of it, because it's quite. Unfortunately, they stopped racing in the UK last year because of Brexit the year before, and I don't know if they're coming back anytime soon, but it's almost cheaper to go and watch him at Spa, or certainly more exciting. You know, to go to Spa or something like that would be a really good road trip to watch an ELMS race. Not expensive to get in, brilliant race, and guaranteed a really good race. Go and look at the LMP2s, which sound amazing. £750,000 for a rolling chassis, and then you have to pay €1,000 an hour to lease the engine. So they're not cheap things to run, but they're really, really good cars, really good racing, and you get a 4-hour race out of it.
Absolutely. And what is it about endurance racing that really captures that spirit? Do you think it is purely just like the most difficult kind of category, like a 24-hour race or a 12-hour race? Yeah. That challenge of applying yourself as a pit team in the crew for that entire period. Yeah. Is it just cooler because it's more difficult, or how do you view that kind of
I just think it's a lot more open. So, you know, Formula One is extremely commercialised, of course, because it kind of has to be for the sort of money that's involved in it. So everything's expensive. I think it's $5,000 to get in the paddock or something stupid. You know, it's just all aimed at the wealthy, really, and that's their brand, isn't it? Which is all well and good. But then you go to what's the stark difference is you go to like a sort of something like an endurance race where you can get to the backs of the pit guys in the paddocks and so on, get much closer. And in fact, I'm sure they have a session on the Saturday, I think, where you can walk them down the pit lane, and the drivers are signing cards and things for you, and all the rest of it. It's so much. It's like going back in time a little bit for me. Everything's much more open, and everybody's much more open. They kind of invite you in the pit guys to look at the cars and things. Imagine that in Formula One. It's just never going to happen. So, unless you're a multimillionaire, of course. So I think it's that aspect that I like about it. And yes, it's tough, you know, staying awake it's not 24 hours, it's more like 48 hours you're almost awake for the race is difficult, you know, it's especially as you get older. But the thrill of it is there, and it adds that extra dimension of keeping the flaming car running for, you know, even the 4-hour races, it's sometimes quite tough to keep a car running on the absolute limit for 4 hours is not so easy, or 6 hours over the races are. 24 is obviously an extreme case for it. But yeah, and I think the friendliness of it all and the atmosphere all sort of, you know, builds up for me to be a really cool series. And I think it's quite underrated. You know, people have sort of jumped on the Formula E thing, and I've been to quite a few of their races, and it's okay. I'm a bit old school, if I'm honest. But the likes of ELMS, who are, I think I'm right in saying, they're using e-fuel this year, so they're sort of trying to combat the emissions situation, and they're using, I think I'm right in saying, they're using fuel that's come from the waste of grapevines, and they're somehow turning that into an e-fuel, and that cuts down emissions by about 60-70%. So they're doing their bit, which is great. I think that's absolutely right. not everything can go electric. It's not appropriate for every form of racing, of course. I do think F1 on a good target there. They've got the most efficient powertrains that have ever been built by anybody anywhere, and they're heading towards running them on e-fuel. So then the emissions will, in effect, be less than the electric because you haven't got the emissions of building the battery packs in the first place and so on. So that's interesting development, and everything's heading in that direction one way or the other, isn't it? Whether it's battery or hybrid or e-fuel kind of thing. So yeah, but I'd say if you ever get a chance, get it down to an ELMS race.
And there's so many different forms as well from the engineering side, especially with something like the World Endurance Championship. You have 4 different categories of cars all racing on track at the same time. And that style of racing, not only is it extremely different to Grand Prix racing, but it's almost a bit more open, where you will genuinely get some cars, in the Pro-Am GT battling against the Pro GT, or the GT battling against the LMP2, and they're actually having a fight. It's not purely just a blue flag situation. Would you say that's an opportunity to specialise for a young engineer listening to this? There's a gap there in European Le Mans.
Yeah, because I find the whole thing quite interesting, really. And the new generation of, well, they're not called LMP1s now, the LMDH, whatever they are, the height of it.
Prototypes, yeah.
Yeah, the prototypes are really interesting cars they are now, with the hybrid systems in them. And there's much more manufacturers coming into it because it's gone hybrid after they've recovered from the whole diesel scandal when Audi backed out and all the rest of it. So we've got a lot of the manufacturers coming back into it. And it's a really, really interesting race series right now. The World Endurance, they wouldn't let it lie for long. It's a really good series. So they've managed to, I think anyway, absolutely nail the cars that they're running now and the series and the specs of them. And the next few years are going to be really interesting. Back to the heyday, hopefully, of endurance racing. And so, yeah, I absolutely think there's an interesting outlet there, whether you like GTs or the prototype side of it, with the whole hybrid situation. And it's exciting racing, and it's just not quite as it's not as pompous and it's not as commercial as Formula One, to be honest. And they still have exciting pit stops and lots of them, and so on. So yeah, I'd definitely recommend looking into that. There's quite a few teams. You've got one of the best ones, of course. You've got Toyota Motorsport. They're only in Germany. Fantastic facility there. Absolutely mind-blowing. Really good restaurant. And lots of, you got all the engine manufacturers. You got Orica over here. There's so much going on in Europe for endurance. That's why America are looking to, because the cars are the same now. The IMSA in America, the cars are basically finally got together and decided that the cars can be the same spec, and that's really exciting as well. So you get European guys being really valuable in America because it's all new to them. Certainly the hybrid side of things and the even P2s are. It's all kind of new stuff to them.